Welcome to the Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross Show, awakening your full potential and expanding your understanding of how to live fully and joyfully by making conscious choices that promote and maintain vitality in all areas of your life. Now here's your host, Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross. Please be sure to listen to this episode in an environment that is safe. Do not listen to this recording while driving a car or operating any kind of machinery.
Welcome to The Vital Life. It's a great day to talk about our topic today, which is women's spirituality, and my special guest is Mary Faulkner. Mary, who's a friend and a guest, has published 7 books, including The Complete Idiot's Guide to Understanding Catholicism. She's currently working on a book with the title Practicing the Seven Sacraments. She is also in the process of laying out the plot for a novel, which will be her first. Her newest book, and the one being featured on today's show, is Women's Spirituality, Power and Grace, which was released just in August of this year. Mary is a pioneer in the field of mind-body healing as both a therapist and a teacher. She uses clinical hypnotherapy, seeing it as the language for mind-body communication. And she also offers certification in the use of clinical hypnotherapy in healing trauma at the Integrative Life Center, an outpatient treatment program for addiction, disordered eating, and mood disorders in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to the program, Mary. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. It's always good to talk with you.
Oh, yes. I know. We rarely see each other anymore, but I loved your book, Women's Spirituality. It's quite an amazing book.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to just start out by asking you about the title, because you specifically call it Women's Spirituality. How is that different from men's spirituality?
Okay, well, that's good, because that's usually that's often, let me say, the first question that comes up is why women? But I'm pitching it to women because it helps validate and kind of explain a way that we are in the world that is often not the subject of spirituality. When I describe it, as I will, many men believe the same things or, are involved in the same kind of activities, but I'm talking specifically about women. And one of the ways that women's spirituality is different than men's is that it very much deals with life here on earth. It isn't otherworldly. It doesn't have as much to do with getting to heaven or pleasing God and that kind of thing as men's spirituality or what we generally understand as spirituality. It's about feeding people. It's about getting babies raised and educated and a safe living environment. And it's got a very much of a green cast to it, and it involves making life better for people here on earth. And women see that as a spiritual imperative, not a political necessarily a political imperative, but a spiritual imperative, that it's morally right to do that.
Yeah. Well, in your book, you really go through a lot of spiritual traditions all the way back from, the goddess, archetypes, rituals and ceremonies, and then you also move forward into kind of more traditional religious organizations like Judaism and Christianity and so on. Why did you include such a full spectrum of spirituality when you wrote this book?
That's a good question, because at times I wish I hadn't. But
well, that's why I say it's quite an undertaking. It's such a thorough sort of review of everything that has anything to do with women's spirituality.
It is. It's almost like a history of women in a way. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't denominational or pertaining to just one segment of the culture, one belief system. I wanted to make sure that it was dealing with women, not a kind of spirituality. So in order to really make that point, I wanted to give airtime to, the major arenas that we think of as religious or spiritual arenas. And
do you think that women are more open to these other areas, say, than men?
Absolutely. That was one thing that did become clear, is that women cross denominational lines easily. We talk with people that from different religions and churches and don't have the same kind of attachment to it being a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the whole discussion about goddess has been pretty important coming up to 2012 with some of the changes that we're expecting to happen? But why did you think the goddess is an important symbol for women?
Well, we in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Parthenon, we have a 41, almost 42-foot tall statue of Athena. And I invite everyone who is in your listening audience to please come to Nashville and see this. It is absolutely breathtaking. But that aside, I think that the goddess symbolically represents facets of women that aren't always recognized in the culture. That we grew up, most of us grew up with kind of the archetypes of mother, maybe teacher and nurse. Just a kind of a narrow field that women needed to fit into to be recognized. The goddess imagery, there's a goddess of the wild, and there's an adventuring goddess, and a healing goddess, and a mother goddess, and there's a whole even a sex goddess, Aphrodite. And so there's a whole panoply of archetypes that women can then, find themselves. We're not in.
So when you talk about the goddess as archetype, the archetype is really just like a role that we can play in our lives, correct?
Yeah, and that women, have certain areas that they're more drawn to, and but without any role modeling, it's difficult sometimes to imagine yourself in those positions. You, as a woman doctor, must have encountered that to some degree.
Of the difficulty of being somebody outside of who I was expected to be?
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would probably have a wild woman inside of me that hasn't been expressed yet.
Well, call me when you're in town next time. We'll get her going.
Well, I imagine, though, that a lot of people listening to us talk about goddesses, if they're from, a traditional religious background, don't really understand why this is such a useful kind of way of thinking about things. Can you say a little bit more about how maybe you've used it in your work or in your personal life? Yes,
I can. They are role models, is what we're talking about, and personality types and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily divine in the way that we think in the Judeo-Christian traditions of God being, God's an archetype too, for that matter. But
let's not go there yet.
Okay, we'll wait on that one. But it being an archetype means think of it in psychological terms. There we go. Rather than spiritual terms, think of it psychologically. That it helps women develop more aspects of themselves and more talents that they have that might not get developed if they weren't encouraged by the fact that, a goddess has already done this for them, so that they have some role modeling to follow. It helps break them out of cultural boundaries.
Yeah. That's really great. In your book, what I liked is you wrote about some important archetypes or role models / goddesses, and then you relate them to modern day women. So I know you mentioned Artemis, Athena. Do you remember any of the examples that you gave on that? Because I thought that really brought it home for me in terms of understanding those parts of us.
Yes, and I remember the Artemis archetype, and I can't think of their names, and I'm looking in here to try to find them. You know how it is trying to remember names at this point.
Well, I think you have Artemis. Well, Artemis is the Girls Gone Wild one, right? It's our pure wild nature.
Yeah, it's our pure wild nature, but it's also, the women that who's that woman that went out and observed the gorillas for all
That's
those
Jane Goodall.
Yeah, she would be an example of that. So she went off, by herself and studied the
the chimpanzees and their family life. And
right.
So Artemis, the people who have that part of themselves that they're expressing, I mean, she doesn't sound really wild.
No, it wasn't wild, but she was in the wild, meaning she was observing nature. She was not in an office doing something. She was out encountering it in the wild. So she was, and also she's attributed with saving the species. And so, she really made an impact in the world with her work.
And then Athena, you call a man's woman.
Right. Now, I would say Hillary Clinton is one of the ones that I would say operates in that mode, that she is a stateswoman. She's also a married woman and a mother, but she, on her own, aside from being the first lady of the land, went out and became a senator from New York and now our foreign representative. So she's really located herself in the political realm. I would say Oprah Winfrey too, because she is a CEO of a huge dynasty. I think she's a
multi-billion-dollar dynasty.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an example of how these archetypes can play out in our daily lives. And just I think Aphrodite, which is the kind of sex goddess, and you mentioned Marilyn Monroe as being a representative of that one, right?
Yes, definitely. She would be like the icon of it.
Yeah, exactly. If you looked her up in the Athena in the dictionary, Marilyn Monroe's picture would be right next to that.
That's right. And what it does, of course, I don't think our young women are having as much trouble expressing themselves sexually as perhaps my generation was a little bit more repressed.
Right.
But it gives women permission to be sexual and sensuous, not necessarily licentious, not necessarily acting out, but being okay with their sexuality.
Being naturally okay with their sexuality.
Exactly.
So, Mary, before the break, we were talking about some of the archetypes and their modern-day examples, and that was really fun. But I wondered, how do archetypes, or how do we use archetypes to help us in our spiritual journey?
Well, I guess it would begin with kind of how we describe our spiritual journey, and for me, I would say it's to develop ourselves in as many ways as we can to to expand our consciousness, to be the Army co-opted this, but it's such a great phrase: be all we can be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so the archetypes they're ancient. They've been used by many, many, many cultures. They are on our hard drive, is what I like to say. They are human impulses that are on our hard drive. And so having them kind of recognized and part of the culture gives us permission to express that part of our nature that, unless the culture is open to it, can be difficult for us to do. And
if a woman hasn't really gotten in touch with that side of her, and you give a number of examples, in the book about, like I know you talk about somebody called Jane Marsoni who started to get in touch with the different archetypes that she was not expressing. But if someone isn't in touch with that part of themselves, how do you get started with that? Besides reading your book, which is excellent place to start, I might add.
Well, thank you. That's where I would start them.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there's a couple other good books. I've got them in the bibliography that were written actually back in the 80s, and they're on archetypes. And the names of them are not coming to me right now, but I'll find them. So I get online and look. There'll be discussions online. There's lots of different ways of getting going in it, and then just let your imagination lead you, or let your interest lead you.
Now, do you use this at all because you do therapy work with people with addictions and eating disorders and so on. Do you use this type of approach in that work?
I do often, especially when a woman is having trouble with whatever narrow definition that has been put on her life. And eating disorders and addiction and all of that often is rooted in that kind of thing, where she's misidentified in the beginning and then kind of held into a role that isn't expressing her spirit. And archetypes are about expressing our spirit. That's why they're part of women's spirituality, in my mind, is that we have a very interesting and vibrant spirit that likes to do and be a lot of different things. And when women are held into, being the good daughter or the devoted mother, which are both, those are good roles. I'm not putting that down. I've been both. But beyond that, there's also, there's further expression past that. And sometimes women get truncated into particular roles like that, and they can't grow on out of them.
And then there's some roles that we do need to have some balance with. You talked in your book about the rebel and in yourself, and how you learned to accept that and bring it into balance through what you call voice dialoguing. Is that something you could explain in a short period of time, or is it too?
No, I think it can. The example I have in the book is where you kind of get in touch with a part of your nature before the dialoguing, but to be able to write it or talk about it, let that character have a voice.
How did you know there was a rebel inside of you?
Oh, please. You've been to meetings with,
How did it show up in your life, though?
Well, it showed up too much and in negative ways, meaning that I was acting out a lot. I was being, like disrespectful, maybe you might say, or just kind of hot-shotty and all that. And it's not a bad thing to rebel, but when you're doing it disrespectfully or hurting yourself in the process, there's no point. And it was through a lot of different means that I began to look at, okay, each character has an opposite character. Okay. And I wasn't finding the opposite character to my rebel, which turned out to be kind of an altruistic side of myself, who then I could say I was rebelling against things in the culture that weren't just. I used my rebel to be a voice for justice, a voice for the underdog. And all that. So it began to put some form on just what was just kind of acting out kinds of behaviors.
Okay, so and that sometimes shows up in our patients with, especially those with addictions and so on, that they may be rebelling in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, that hurts them.
Yeah, that hurts them. And there may be another side that they're trying to express, but that isn't reaching full expression.
Yeah, and that's what I would ask them. I would say, okay, we got a good handle on your rebel here. Now who holds your rebel in check? Who's your rebel's unspoken partner? And so I began to help them go inside of their inner world and kind of get a hold of, okay, who is sitting across from the rebel? Or, use images like that so that to kind of help them get a hold of it.
And you can actually then talk to the rebel and the person sitting across from the rebel, have a dialogue. Are there any particular patterns that you see in people with addictions or eating disorders where any particular patterns of archetypes that you see, or is it really just very individual?
It's individual to a point, but I think like with drugs and alcohol, it's often the rebel. Smoking, definitely the rebel. And then with eating disorders, it can often be a Persephone character, which is like a little girl character, and she is not wanting to grow up. And in the story, Persephone gets abducted and taken to the Underworld, and but she does emerge on the other side. And I think that's good for women to know. So I usually tell them that story, is that she gains knowledge of the underworld, but she chooses to, to live in the above world. But those stories that go with the archetypes are interesting and helpful.
Are there lessons that are assigned to each archetype? Are there lessons we can learn from Persephone?
I would say with Persephone that she masters the underworld. She learns how to walk in through that and come out the other side, which I think is an important thing for women that are caught in that to realize that they can, that they will be given the skills and the ability to get out of the underworld if they're caught there. And I think
what does the underworld represent? Is it the dark side of ourselves, or
I think so. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the addiction, the behaviors, the dysfunction that goes with an eating disorder. Say, you're dealing with death at the end of the road with that if it's not checked.
Mm-hmm.
With all the addictions, they all lead to death if they're not arrested.
And what, in your experience, leads people to get trapped in a role as Persephone, taken to the underworld and all of that? What kind of experiences in life can lead to that?
Well, we know that a lot of the times it's abuse. A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it's a sexual abuse that has happened. It's not always that case, for sure. I want to make that clear. It's not always that, but it often is. Mm-hmm. And that just creates a chaos in the psyche, and a woman is often not able to mature out of that for a variety of reasons. It hurts them physiologically as well as psychologically and spiritually. So that would be being caught in the underworld, nothing that you brought on yourself necessarily, but there you find yourself. In a way, that's like being abducted and taken to the underworld.
Wow. It's almost like a possession in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just have a couple of minutes before our next break. But one of the things you write about in your book, you say that women use the words connection and relationship over and over when describing spirituality. And I'm just wondering why women are so interested so much more in connection and relationship than men are.
Okay.
Part of our nature, huh?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the things, we still have a couple minutes. So one of the things you talk about is building altars and altars are where these spiritual concepts come to life. Can you just give us like a minute and a half about why women might want to build an altar in their home, or what are the circumstances that may be appropriate for building altars?
I'd love to talk about that, and we maybe need more time than that, but just briefly, it's a focus. And when you pull an altar together, it's symbolic representation of what it is that you want to focus on. And so every time you look at it or pass by it, your subconscious mind understands the symbols that you've laid out. And so it's a reminder and, a direction to you to move in that direction. They're very powerful for focusing the subconscious mind on a conscious goal.
Okay. So an altar can have anything on it and usually, I think you say in your book, it's usually things that people are drawn to that they put on the altar. It doesn't have to make sense, so to speak, or be intellectually appropriate.
No, it's usually aesthetically pleasing. Like there'll be, it's a nice little arrangement, a rock, a shell, a feather, a little portrait. You build a little collection of things, and they have an aesthetic quality to them.
My guest today is Mary Faulkner, and she's the author of Women's Spirituality, Power and Grace. She's also a teacher of clinical hypnotherapy and works as a therapist treating addictions, disordered eating, and mood disorders in Nashville. So, Mary, before we went on break, we were just talking about altars and about that as a way, building an altar in your home as a way to focus something that you want to focus on. So could you build an altar, for example, to, heal a loss?
Oh, yes. That would be a real appropriate and helpful thing to do. And there's no rules for it other than that you would have that on your mind. You might sit and meditate with it, and then you just kind of allow the symbols to present themselves. And it can be, it can be a picture of that person or something that you did together that had, you symbolize an event or an experience of that person, and you just begin to pull those things together. And they honestly, once you start doing it, the stuff finds you, and it's, and you begin to collect it. And then when you put it all together, it's odd, but it'll all fit together, and it'll work because the subconscious mind has kicked in, and it's an artist. It's our inner artist. And so it's it's selecting things that have meaning and also will fit together. You don't know how they fit together until you pull it together and sit and talk about it, and then all of a sudden they've all connected.
I know in many other cultures it's pretty common to do that kind of thing, but usually it's more aimed towards, like an altar for Buddha I've seen in different places, in different people's homes. But are there other things that you could make an altar for? Say you're trying to break a pattern of scarcity or financial difficulty. Is that something you could build an altar for, or is it too unspiritual?
No, there is no unspiritual in this realm.
Okay.
Yeah, so our need for security and money and all that is spiritual. It's, just not a spirituality of poverty. It's a being comfortable and having a comfortable, nice life, and being generous with that also. But yes, you could do that. In fact, I remember one time a friend of mine was having money issues, and she was just kind of paralyzed with a scarcity mentality. She was just always fearful around money. Well, that isn't a mindset that will create prosperity for you if you're scared. So we worked together and kind of talked about it, and then she pulled an altar together, and we put a dollar bill on it. And then I challenged her to burn the dollar. And that's exactly. And I said, no, I want you to see that you have money to burn. And she, so it's kind of a ritual that went with it, but she finally burned it, and she just, I could just see her going through so much stuff in burning that. She was crying and yelling and laughing, and it was just like this release that she realized that she had money to burn. I wouldn't have done that with a 20.
What about with a $100 bill?
No,
would that have challenged you, Mary?
That wouldn't have worked for me, but symbolically the one was enough.
Yes. Well, now that you mention ritual and ceremony, that you talk a lot about that in your book as part of women's spirituality, and it occurs to me, just as an aside, that one of the things that your book is good for is if people have not found full expression in their traditional, religions or whatever, that your book offers so many other traditions for them to pull from. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
So anyway, and one of the things you talk about in terms of ritual and ceremony is that about Halloween, and we're coming close to Halloween. And you had another way of looking at Halloween in your book, another way of celebrating Halloween. Can you say a little bit about that?
Now, is that the dinner for the dead that I was talking about?
I think so.
Yeah, we did that. I had a group of us that we met together for years and went through the seasons of the year. So I just wanted to say that this spirituality and the rituals are not in conflict with any tradition. You still go to church and do your own religious thing, but this addresses a different level, so they're not a conflict. But anyway, we would have the dinner for the dead, and we had a nice sit-down dinner with a pretty set table and all that, and people brought a picture or a symbol of somebody that they had lost that had meaning for them. And after the dinner part, we would sit and each person would introduce that person. Each guest would introduce the person that they had brought, whose memory we were celebrating. And honestly, when we started that part, it got so deep and so intense so fast. It was like we all just went into another space. And it was like those people were there. And we introduced our guest, and what was something about that guest our deceased guest, that they have embodied themselves, so that person is still living in a way through them. And it was so powerful. I mean,
I really love that because, having lost quite a number of people in my life, including one of my sons, I find that in our culture, people really feel uncomfortable talking about relatives or family members who've crossed over, and you end up, kind of only getting to talk to your therapist about it.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that there could be a ritual, which I think is the way that it's done in other cultures, that Halloween is All Hallows Eve is the Day of the Dead, and people go to the cemeteries and take flowers, and they have other ways of celebrating Halloween, right?
Yes, my friend Norris Bennett, whose story's in the book also, is from Central America, and lived in Mexico for a long time, but she really talks about that too. They go to the cemetery, they bring a whole dinner, they sit and talk with the dead, they bring them up to date of what's gone on in the family that year. And that person continues to be part of the family life, it's just a whole different approach to death.
Yeah, and they are still a part of us anyway. And
yeah,
I think
it's acknowledging what really is happening. Yeah,
and it's sort of sad to me that it makes people uncomfortable when you bring that up. And I know for me especially, if you bring up the loss of a child, it's almost like people feel it's contagious. So in our culture, we don't have these kinds of rituals to honor and include the dead. So that really touched me. I also had another question for you on a kind of a different topic, that one of the things you talk about as being associated with women's spirituality is that it seems to be a quest for political and social justice. So how does spirituality fit into politics and social justice?
Well, like I said, the idea that sharing the wealth and making sure that everyone's child is fed, and that abject poverty is addressed in a culture that has so much, that just becomes a political issue. You may not start with it at the political level, but it's going to take political change to make that a reality. But I think the change really happens internally. But with enough people having that internal change, then external changes begin to happen.
But why do you see that as part of spirituality? Are you saying I know you talked earlier that women's spirituality is kind of more the practical version that takes into account social ills and so on. So you're saying that women are just sort of hardwired in their spiritual selves to want to address these things?
I think so. I think that our compassion and empathy are hardwired. And that goes, for eons and eons of raising children and being the inner circle in the tribe, or, in any of the different eras of history that women have been in. We've been wired to be more sympathetic, empathetic, connected to people, so that when you're seeing abject poverty or somebody suffering, women tend to feel it too. We have to struggle to not take it on, but our natural impulse is to want to help and to fix and to and I don't mean fix in a bad way, but to address it. Let me say it that way. That's a better word. Address the problem. Help people. And
so you see that as part of a woman's sort of godly nature?
I think so, and I think we're wired that way. From my studies, I would say we are wired that way. We have a little bit more corpus callosum, the connective tissue between right and left brain, so we have more availability to our compassionate nature. And that's there for a purpose. And so it's frustrating when you have that awareness to live in a culture that isn't playing that out in a healthy way. So that we're confronted with injustices all the time, and that can be challenging.
And do you see that across cultures? This this connection between politics and social justice and women's spirituality?
It's there. The wiring's the same in the different cultures. How it gets played out is probably different. Mm-hmm. And I did focus on Western culture for this, this examination or this exploration of spirituality.
But you talk about Celtic spirituality. You talk about Native American and African American. So, there's a wide array of cultures that you do, discuss in the book. So,
yeah, and they do share that. And I would say of those cultures, probably Native American is women are very akin to Native American spirituality.
Oh.
Because
why do you say that?
Well, because it is tribal, it's communal, it's sharing the resources. It also honors nature. It sees God in nature. Those are some of the reasons. It's actually more of a feminine culture than ours. Not ours because we're all part of the same culture, but say the Eurocentric culture.
Right. Very interesting. My special guest today is Mary Faulkner, and she's the author of the book Women's Spirituality, Power, and Grace, which is a fabulous book that I recommend all of you pick up or give as gifts for the holidays coming up. And Mary, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you see the future as it relates to women and global issues.
Okay, I want to hearken back to the title to get into that discussion, and that is that I chose women's spirituality, power, and grace. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of defines spirituality and women and power. Women have experienced power in a negative way, and so therefore they usually don't want to think of themselves as powerful. They push that word away, and they get uncomfortable when you refer to their personal power. I wanted to bring it out as grace, meaning that we all have an inborn power, and that is, God's presence within us, let's say it that way. And everyone has an equal amount of that. There isn't any more God in one person than in another person. So that kind of sets that up for how that begins to awaken that part of women, so that they begin to find their voice and begin to have more influence in decisions in their life. It's kind of in that eventually, to me, plays out in a political way. In that what we want, if there's enough voices, what we want happens. And
yeah.
I think women's voices have been muffled over the years, and that we're we need to be able to find that voice and feel strong about what we want to see the world look like.
And when you mean grace, are you saying that a woman's exercise of her power is with grace?
Yes, it is with grace, and I also I love that what you just said. I think that's a really pretty frame for that. And then it also is given to us by God, which that would be the grace part. Is also that it is a gift. It isn't something you acquire. You don't make a lot of money and become power. I mean, we know that isn't true, but ideally, power is separate from your accomplishments. It is just organic to who we are.
It's a part of our nature.
Yes,
to have that power.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's very important for women all over, because I know you, like I, see so many women who have lost their voice or are afraid of speaking their own truth, and how it kills the spirit. It kills a part of your spirit when you're not able to speak your own truth.
Yes.
So in your book you have, I don't know how many stories of women who have been influential in history, and women who illustrate, certain aspects of spirituality and so on. But can you tell me a couple of women that you've personally been inspired by?
One of my mentors is a woman here in Nashville, Jenny Adams, and she lives in Franklin. And, she's I call her the Grande Dame of counseling. She's in her 80s and she's still working, and she's mentored me a lot. And I learned how to be a gracefully aging woman by going out to lunch with her. She's just so open and loving to everyone, and so grounded and simple in her approach to people. It's just so interesting to me to watch.
And that's a hard thing to learn, how to be a gracefully aging woman in American culture, because everything in the culture tells us we're done as soon as we get old, you know.
And here she is at the pinnacle of her career, and she's in her 80s. And when we walk into a restaurant, Carolyn, everyone comes forward. All the wait staff come, the manager comes, everyone comes because she's just that way. She knows all their names, she knows, you know, where they're going to school and all that. It's just an amazing thing to go out with her.
So is there anybody else that you can think of?
Well, when I was putting the book together, I'm going to go back into history to grab some of these other names because they were so powerful. They just stopped me in my tracks. Sojourner Truth being one of them. And in her work in she just did amazing work for equal rights.
For equal rights and helping free the slaves.
Slaves and women's rights, both things. So most of these women operated in 2 or 3 arenas. And that's kind of what I wanted to make sure that people hear, too, is that women are working for justice in areas that they're not directly involved in. For instance, you know, white women were helping black women get in freeing the slaves, and not enough, I'm sure. But I'm saying that it isn't just your own kind that you're interested in. So Harriet Tubman's another one. Katie Stanton, who was a contemporary of theirs, and those women all met together and kind of strategized together. That's a book I want to write too.
Yeah, I wish the thing I miss the most as being a woman who's getting older is the kind of groups I used to belong to when I was younger, where women would get together and kind of discuss issues that were important to them and discuss spirituality and things like that. And that seems to be not as easy to do anymore for some reason. I'm not quite sure why.
Well, I think a lot of it is that we're all really busy working and doing a lot of that are some of that is you just don't have time for, and I think that's too bad. I think I don't know if it's in the book or not, but I had a group way back in the 70s, I believe it was, and it was we got together and played poker. And it was like a non-traditional women's group. That was my rebel that got that going. But in that, we began to put together our understanding of the culture in which we lived, and we began to identify the sexism and the ageism and the racism of the culture we lived in. And so it became a tool of empowerment for us, and you know, and we had some fun playing cards too. So
that was the other side.
Yeah,
and,
the other side. Yeah.
And I think even beyond not having groups to belong to, a lot of young women that I work with actually don't like other women, and they've grown up in a culture where women are competitive with each other, and so that's very sad. And I know in where we both work at the ranch, a lot of our patients end up discovering that part of themselves that loves to be a friend to other women. So, and that's really important too.
Isn't that fun when that happens?
Mm-hmm.
It happens because to be a woman and not like women means you don't like yourself. I mean,
exactly.
We're trying to be a little man in a dress, you know.
Yeah, which is the sad thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, I'm sorry to say, but that's all the time we have today. We could talk on and on, apparently. But I really want to thank my guest and friend, Mary Faulkner, and encourage you again to get her book called Women's Spirituality, Power, and Grace. So I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross, and I'll talk to you next week. Until then, I wish you good health and vitality.
You have been listening to the Dr. Carolyn Coker-Ross Show. Please visit CarolynRossMD.com. That's CarolynRossMD.com rossmd.com to access podcasts, show archives, and more about Dr. Ross and her services.